This is Philippians 1, verse 2 through 11. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that the one who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. It is right for me to feel this way about all of you, since I have you in my heart, and whether I am in chains or defending and confirming the gospel, all of you share in God's grace with me. God can testify how I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. And this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike. I used to be a part of the staff here at Collective. I was planning to come down from North Carolina this weekend to be with y'all, but some life circumstances and a pretty major hurricane got in my way. Congratulations on this important moment, receiving a charter and preparing to set your own course. This moment achieves a jointly held dream for a lot of people, and it's really a cause for celebration. As you celebrate and contemplate together, I hope you see how important this moment is. Collective is setting an uncharted course into the religious and spiritual practice of our community. Collective started a while back as a house church called Canvas. The Canvas folks came together because they were concerned that what was on offer in traditional Christianity wasn't particularly connecting with the lives they were living, or worse, they felt like they were being excluded because of who they were, how they thought, or what they looked like. From those early Canvas days, Collective has always valued the fears and the doubts just as much as the love and the community, and has sought to hold them all together in a spirituality that affirms life, the major events just as much as the everyday grind. Our observation of the Eucharist weekly teaches us that ordinary things like bread and wine become profound and sacred when we come together, slow down, sit in silence, and listen to the ground of everything there is. This mysterious part of the Eucharist is the basic fuel for the meaningful life that strong communities should seek. And the elevation of the mundane and simple parts of our life is a great spiritual gift that we shouldn't forget. In the next few years, many decisions will be made about how Collective works and how you all relate to one another. Some of them will be major events that the whole community sees, and some of them will be simple, small, day-to-day decisions. But just like the Eucharist, these small decisions and mundane parts of everyday life are elevated when you bring humility, community, and mindfulness to them. So take that mindfulness forward. Go where experience, conscience, prayer, and meditation lead you. And remember that as a fresh part of the Christian tradition, Collective is free to keep, amend, or leave behind the parts of that tradition in the measure that she chooses. In charting a new course, there can often be a temptation to react and move away from those people that we may disagree with. It was a weakness we often displayed at Canvas, and one that I was personally a part of. As Collective moves forward, I hope that you act in love and resist the temptation to react in frustration. Most of all, I hope that y'all can continue to sincerely search, live in community, and love one another in all that you do. To those of you I know, I miss you. And to everyone, all the love that I have.
I'm glad I watched that a few times before tonight so I could tear up on my own. How old is he, Barb? 26. 26. All right. So we're going to send the Collective students out to Berryville. So any of the students that are going, they're going to roll over to Berryville. Caitlin is also going to bring them back, so parents don't need to go pick them up. If you've got questions or concerns, you can call the collective number extension 3, and that will ring to her cell phone. You coming, Isaac? All right. Anybody else would rather go for yogurt than participate in this? Clarence, you have to stay. No, that's good try. Great try. See y'all later. So I want to. Obviously, that was Mike Furlong. He introduced himself, and we're gonna talk about our roots tonight. We'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to pause to thank the Throwback House Band. This was Robbie Corelli, Turner Swan, Andrew Brooks. And we'll get into the storytelling more, but I think when we started Canvas, I think was I still working at Stetson? So you were the original musician, right? On an acoustic guitar. And then you moved, and then Furlong was in for years. Furlong made the transition with us here. Robbie jumped in. Robbie and Furlong for a long time. Then Robert, and then everybody Robert's. So just looking at the music could be a documentary on how things have gone, but amazingly grateful. So tonight we're going to begin in earnest. This process is going to take us 7 weeks, at the end of which we're going to have a clearer sense of who we're becoming and what we're going to be doing in the next season of Collective, the next 4 to 5 years. We're going to get into the process in greater depth next week, but essentially what we're going to do is look to discover what is best in us, in this community, to appreciate and affirm what is unique, what is distinctive, how we can best express that in our shared lives together in service to God, the universal sacred, the common good, to one another, and to the world. So then we will dream about what kind of future that we might share together, and then we'll design it. So that's sort of the seven-week process. Because the truth is this, we could do any number of things, and the caliber of person who has become a part of what we're doing over the years blows my... I mean, that was Mike. He's 26, and there's a room full of you guys. So we could do anything we want. The sad part is we can't do everything. And so part of what we're going to do is figure out how to hone our focus. We could make so many incredible contributions, but if we don't focus, we also could diffuse all of this great energy and not really make any difference. So we're going to take this season to celebrate who we are and focus on who we're becoming. And we've picked the image of a compass, the work of orientation, which is not a step-by-step guide. This is not something you can click on Google Maps and it'll tell you turn by turn and distance by distance how to get to X that marks the spot. This is where we're going. Instead, this is a direction. And it's helping us maybe to get our bearings. But if anything, it's going to sort of describe and orient. It's not going to define and prescribe fixed destinations. And I think the season invites us into two kinds of reflection. External orientation. This is the practical focus. And so the question is, what are we good at? And how can we best give that gift to each other and to the world? And this will be sort of the result of the vision season. We'll filter whatever vision we come up with through the values in our community statement. Then we'll come up with some goals. We'll translate those into strategies, and then we'll translate those into tasks. So this is going to help us to know what to do on like a day-to-day basis. Like, where should we put our money? What should Jess do when she comes into work? How should I spend my time week to week? What should Caitlin be doing with the time that she has? Concrete, external orientation. So we're going to get to that. But deeper than that is both the communal and individual internal orientation. Here we call that spiritual formation. That the whole of the community and every individual within it. And here's what I mean. I was talking to my friend Jonathan this week. And he moved to Orlando from California a few years ago. And he said it's taken him years to realize that when people say they're going to the West Coast, they mean Tampa, not LA. And he's like, this is the most frustrating thing in the world because I've been in California my whole life and I moved to Orlando and now the West Coast means something totally different. And it reminded me, I was talking to him, I was like, oh yeah, that's like the first time I ever went to Costa Rica on a surf trip. And we had somebody tell us that there was this really, really amazing break, like 25, 30 minutes south. And we ended up 25, 30 minutes north because I come from the East Coast where south is to the right. And so if you go that way on the West Coast, you are not going the right way. The point is, we tend to take for granted what we could call our internalized geography. Basic stuff like the relativity of north and south, where the sun rises, where the sun sets, based on where we live. And so this process, the next several weeks, is going to ask us to draw into conscious reflection and to reflect on this intentionally. Where do we live? For us, what is north? Where is the sun? Where are the stars? And how do we orient where we're going from here, from where we are? Speaking of which, I made a really good decision on Monday last week. We chartered Sunday night, deep breath. I got on a plane Monday and flew to Chapel Hill because there was a hurricane coming, and I felt like that was a good place to be. No, I was supposed to be at a conference all week. I was supposed to go Monday morning until Thursday. They ended up cutting it in half. And so Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, I'm on and off flights with Delta. Like, look, I really need to get to Melbourne. I know I didn't buy travel insurance because I'm smarter than you, and I don't need that. And they're like, you really do need that, especially in the event of something like a hurricane. So back and forth. I was like, look, I just really need to get to Orlando from Chapel Hill. And of course, they said, well, we can definitely help you get there. It's really easy to get there. The only thing is this: I wouldn't start here. This is a riff on a parable I told a little while ago. But we have this instinct. I think no matter where we're going, we're like, oh, we're going to go somewhere new. We have this sort of uncharted territory in front of us, all these dreams maybe for it. And unfortunately, one of our main instincts is, oh man, I wish we weren't where we are. This would be so much easier if we didn't have to start here, but we have to. I mean, of course, I would not start with all of these unforeseen questions about membership and trying to navigate the finer points of our relationship with the Methodist Church in the middle of this vision discovery season, while in this massive property transition, waiting on a massive loan, having taken on several different projects in the last 18 months. If I had a choice, I wouldn't start here either. Tough shit. This is where we are. We're starting here. We don't have a choice. This is where we are. So we start here. And so with vision, with getting wherever it is we're going, maybe we'd rather not start here. Maybe we could think of a more convenient place to start. Or maybe there's a better prepared point of embarking in the minds of leadership and org theory gurus. But here we are. And part of faithfully starting from where we are is beginning with clarity about how it is that we got here. And you've already kind of heard a little bit of that from Mike. Tracing our origins, tracing our roots, celebrating the ones who came before us, and those from whose investment we are now benefiting. The good work begun that will be completed. I just have to mention this because it is off-putting enough that I think it might have been to other people. What's with all of this on the day and until the day of Christ Jesus stuff in the text? And I know what you're thinking, duh, Ben, this is when Jesus descends from Castle Grayskull on a flaming sheep with a lightsaber and banishes all the infidels. No, this is actually mystical language for the hope of ultimate universal integrity, unity, wholeness, oneness. In John's Gospel, Jesus prays that those who come after him will be one. One. That's the prayer. He goes on to say, as God is in me and I am in God, may they be in me and we in God and God in them. So it gets really kind of complex. But the point is unity. That there's this connection. This is the messianic hope spoken of as the day of Christ Jesus, or as the kingdom of God, or as eternal life, depending on where you read it in the Bible. So we're going to look back as we prepare to look forward with this sort of deep and resonant hope that everything will come together, that the direction, the ultimate direction we're headed in is oneness, it's wholeness, it's peace, shalom. And if you've seen a good movie or read a good book, you know that what we really need to know in order to get started is the origin story, character development, and the plot line. Because we can't write the next chapter of Collective without embracing and building on the continuing story of the chapters that came before. So tonight I'm going to be joined by some of my great friends who are going to head this way right now, who will be on a panel and who paved the way for where we are today. We're going to chat about three things. How was Collective started? How did things develop? And then sort of our identity as a result. So how we got started is the origin story, how we developed is the character development, and our identity is sort of the plot line. What's the story that we're telling? What's the story that we're living? What? Yeah, no, that was when I said come up. It wasn't a metaphor. Literally come up here. And what you're going to get to do is follow along. If you didn't get a sheet, can somebody hand some of these sheets out? You should have a blank sheet with 2 questions. And so this is so you can sort of engage in the process of our storytelling. I want you to be listening for, did you hear anything about Collective's history that surprised you? Hey, Annabelle. And the second question, what themes did you pick up on that were familiar based on your engagement with Collective? Because my suspicion is that as we start to tell stories, there's going to be things where you go, oh, well, that was the same back then as it is now. That language sounds familiar. That sensibility sounds familiar. That posture. So listen for those things as well. So what surprised you, and then what sort of feels native? And let's. I'm just going to run through these real quick. This is where we are. This was 6 years ago, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, that was Robbie and I and Mike and a lot of bourbon. So, unfortunately, Dave was the only one that got hurt. Poor Dave. So I'm going to stand by. It's all part of the program. I'll bring this back for Robbie, I promise. Well, actually, we'll make him sing music next, so sorry about that. Clarence, how's this going to go right in front of the speaker? Super good. All right, so how was Collective started? We're going to start actually with a video of my best friend, Clark Orr, who couldn't be with us tonight because he's getting ready to do a really, really significant private gallery opening in Orlando on Thursday. And so, as always, he's rushing to finish artwork to start hanging on Thursday. But he wanted to be with us, and this is a video we shot, I think 5 years ago, right as Collective was getting started. So I pressed forward. I don't know if that worked, Clarence. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that one. Let's hope. This could definitely not be him.
I'm Chip Wilson with Free Will Barbecue.
Nope. There's Clark designing. We've got a bunch of these. I don't know which is which, so this could get really fascinating.
Name's Robbie.
Nope. I promised him I wouldn't play it, so we're not going to play it. I know. A true accident. It's going to be too complicated to go through and find that. We're just going to kick it off. So let me bring you up to speed with where some of these characters get involved. First, let me introduce them. Andrew Brooks, who's playing some amazing lead guitar and vocals. Robbie Corelli, acoustic guitar and vocals, and many other things. Annabelle Bourbon-Scott, everything. And Dr. Chuck Heacock. How many of you guys know some of these folks? Handful? Cool. Okay, so we're all friends here. No one needs to be nervous. So I was talking to my parents. I went down to their home in Melbourne this weekend and was just kind of like talking through what we were doing this week. And I was talking about how things got started. And my dad was like, I actually don't know that story. How did this get started? And I was like, what are you talking about? You were a part of my life at that point. And I think as closely as I can summarize it, I was playing in some different bands, and I think the main one I played with for a while was Dish with Berto Aguilar. And my strongest early sense of calling to be a part of something like this, or I guess maybe my recognition that this was absent, was to be closing down Cafe Da Vinci after having played, and to be looking around and seeing artists and musicians and young entrepreneurs and thinkers, particularly faculty from Stetson, and the recognition that as I packed up a drum kit at 2:30 in the morning, none of these people were getting up to go to church the next morning. And I was very aware of the potential and the creativity and the energy in that space. And I thought, this is church for me. This is where I want to be. These are the people I want to be surrounding myself with. And eventually that led to some meetings in a house, in a neighbor's house. I think we met for a while at John and Annabelle's, and then their friends, the Krajiks, we got connected with. And then in January of 2009, we actually started meeting at Cafe Da Vinci under the name Canvas, and that was under different ownership, and sort of off to the races from there. But that, for me, I think is the easiest way to summarize the early recognition that I had that there was not something for a group of people, not for whom they were missing something and needed it, but the opposite. I looked at the world and went, wait a minute, this group of people has so much untapped potential and creativity and love and generosity and goodness. why can't we organize that intentionally? Why can't we ask questions about spirituality and meaning in that group of people in a meaningful way that they would actually choose to be a part of, not get guilted into, not be obligated to go to, but they would actually come and be a part of. I got to mention it because this is tough, but this is such an integral part of our story. Some of those early meetings took place in the home of Bill and Renee McCullough, and they were kind of like a second family for me. They taught the college Sunday school class that I didn't go to nearly enough when I was in college, but when we started Canvas, they were with Chuck and Mary Beth and Sonny and Clayton. They were kind of honestly the adults. Like this is 10 years. I was 26 at the time. I had no idea what I was doing. I was sure I could do it better than anyone else. We needed adults. And so we would meet at the Abbey and we'd have these like meetings, which were, we'd get together and drink and bitch about church. And but the presence of the McCulloughs, the presence of Chuck and Sonny was really the first lending of wisdom into a bunch of maybe like creative energy that hadn't kind of been harnessed. After that, we moved around from Cafe Da Vinci to Bonkers Comedy Club when that was in town, and then we were at the Artisan for a while. But again, it was always in the downtown corridor. It was always a recognition that here, downtown, near Stetson, in the downtown space was a really, really important part of who we were. And it always included discussion. Yeah, for a long time it was bartering. Could we give you a tax write-off? We didn't have any money, so it's like, hey, can we use your space? Good idea. Yeah, are you a sound engineer? He is. That's his day job. Say it again, Chuck.
Just that for a long time it was just who would give us a free space to hang out in.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, it always happened on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon that was the best for the venues that we probably like to frequent other times during the week. But
yeah, absolutely.
It was always nice, yeah.
Well, and that's a good point. So the Sunday evening thing, because we got a lot of pushback because this is, maybe a small liberal arts town, but it's still in the South. So people be like, why are you doing church in the evening? Or that should be like a supplement to real church, which is in the morning. Part of that was, again, the recognition that if you're closing down a bar at 2:30 or 3 a.m., you're not getting up in a few hours to go to church. And so part of it was the idea of giving people the weekend back and going, you know what, if people are musicians, artists, creatives, they're traveling, they're out lecturing, they're doing whatever, getting something as close as you can to a time that they could actually come around was, seemed like a good idea. So Chuck, share a little bit about your kind of early experience. I think apart from Clark, you're the one with the longest.
Yeah, well, actually, we actually go back to kind of pre-Canvas time. Ben and I got to be involved at a church here in DeLand. He was the youth minister to my children as they grew up, and that was kind of cool. So I get to see it from the beginning in that respect, and even, what was the Thursday night thing we did?
Immersed. Yeah, I found that logo. I put that on Facebook.
Immersed was a Thursday night kind of rock and roll evening of, I think.
Yes.
I got to be the sound engineer person, which was amazing. I get to listen to these guys play all the time for the rehearsals and everything. So that was the cool part for me, and I got to learn a lot through that. So that was my early experience was from that perspective. But then as we embarked on kind of separation from or moved into our own path, I guess, as a group, that was fun to see happen, and certainly was through Bill and Renee's kind of the home that they made for us there at their place sometimes.
Yeah.
Created an atmosphere that was pretty solid.
Don't do it. Don't do it. If we all sit up here and cry, it's going to get real awkward.
But their love showed a lot to us and gave us an example that we could all follow, and that was amazingly helpful.
I should clarify for those that don't know, Bill and Renee and their middle son, Ryan, were all killed in a car accident last January, which was devastating, obviously, for us, for a lot of people in this community. But yeah, I was sort of thinking about trying to crystallize what it was, especially from Bill, because he's the one that I had probably the most interaction with. And even though he was like as Baptist as you can get, I think we in our college Sunday school for the first like 6 or 8 months that I went, we never studied the Bible. We studied the Baptist Faith and Message, which is like I don't know, but he was like hardcore into it. But he would also temper that with the fact that if there is a question or if there's disagreement with a denomination or with an interpretation of the Bible, he was huge on the fact that every single person has access to the Spirit and that everyone should find a sense of integrity with how they understand their own spirituality, their own faith, that they don't have to depend on anyone else to give them answers, that we already have what we need. And that, I think, got in deep with me early on and was really formative and kind of what we now experience.
And her thumbprint was all over the community statement to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Annabelle. Oh, no. You can do it. You don't have to. You want to go to Robbie? Okay.
I knew them much later, but I actually used to do sound for Dish at Stetson, which is what got this whole thing started for me. And I think I told you no 100 times to play music, and finally I think you bamboozled me into it. So and then when we came to this space, I'm not sure which you liked more, the fact that I knew how to rip things apart or put them back together.
Yes.
Because the music was definitely an afterthought.
Yeah.
So my enjoyment of breaking things really got me into helping this space grow out, and then I stuck around.
Side note, there will be a lot more opportunities in the near future for sweat equity. So if you liked the look of the way the building used to be, we're about to have a lot more of that. Talk about, any of you, the role that discussion and conversation always had in the time that we spent together on Sunday nights, either before or since we've been here. You got the mic.
Yeah, so that's actually probably the main reason why I was that kept me coming back and wanted to be involved, was because of the posture that we all were taking towards asking good questions, that we didn't have all the answers, that this was a journey that we were on together. And so, yeah, we did discussions every single week as part of our service. And sometimes got a little out of hand. But
yeah, it got dicey.
But we learned some things in there.
Yeah.
And but yeah.
Anybody else need to add to that?
I think that for a long time, church wasn't the place you went to ask questions, and that we just kind of fell together because we wanted to ask those questions in a safe place. Questions need to be asked in order for relationships to grow. And we were all very inquisitive and could come together safely, and you were okay and everyone else was okay with, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's look at it together.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we all just kept coming back.
Yeah. And it was, I'll say, it was my first exposure to trying to do work like this with lots of people who were smarter than me. And so we would ask a question, in the next week we get together, and especially John and Jeff were like voracious readers, super into philosophy. And so I'd pose a question, and John would be like, "Oh, I read these 3 books that have to do with
G.K. Chesterton."
Yeah, and all this and then Jeff is like, "Well, I've been reading all this stuff," and they're like overwhelming me with all the knowledge they have. And so it was, I think, the first time there was really that gift of being able to facilitate a bigger conversation rather than being the sole person that had to bring information to people, bring answers to people, bring sort of definitive solutions. It was great to have the posture. I'm actually going to genuinely ask this question, and maybe I'm the one that knows what one interpretation of the Bible says, but there's also 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 other people who have totally different areas of education and focus and expertise who are all contributing, and that was really a gift.
You asked some questions. Can you go back to them? Because I don't have the paper.
Oh, how did we get started? like the big ones.
Oh, what themes did you hear that were familiar based on your engagement with?
Well, no,
Collective?
this is for them, so
I
they're
know,
supposed to be
but
listening
I
to our.
can-
You've got them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
gonna address the second question.
Cool.
So something that's familiar. You were talking earlier about like, we are where we are. We have to start from where we are.
Yeah.
I remember when we started that you began seminary
Yeah.
while we were having like meetings in your living room.
Yeah.
And I mean, most people don't start a congregation while in seminary, right? Like, isn't that like not the order of operation?
Yeah. Usually not.
And so here we are again.
Yeah.
So there's number 2 for you guys.
Excellent. You do get some good answers.
Also, at that time, it was rare, and I certainly had never heard of anyone else that was starting something without statements of belief. This is where we have a community statement,
Yeah.
but there's no community statement like our community statement.
Yeah.
Our community statement is basically like, we're gonna explore things together, and
I
this-
think you got it with the hand motion.
yeah.
It's just.
But that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
Like, growing up in like a charismatic, super conservative church environment where I was very involved, it was like, and then coming to Stetson, taking a Gospels class,
Reddish.
and my mind being like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah. It's all
Um,
lies.
Yeah. So that's exactly what personally I needed at the time was, and I think that's kind of what a lot of people are searching for, is just a place, like Annabelle was saying, where they can be safe in their unknowing and in their searching and express their experience, their thoughts, and also hear that from other people.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about the community statement, I really think it probably was like, it was our response to people trying to really push us on, well, what do you believe? Like, you're doing this, okay, you're meeting in a bar, that's cute, but like, what do you believe? And like, you're doing, music that's not traditional Christian music, like, that's sort of like cutting edge, but what do you believe? And people were sort of trying to nail us down on that like systematic, like run it through the list of a creed and tell us where you land on like all of these important kind of orthodoxy questions. And I remember Chuck and I, for a long time early on, really wrestled with like the name. And we were really obsessed with the name. We had legal paths, we have different names, and it was all sorts of stupid shit. Like Greek words that we were trying to be, let's call it peripateo. And like, we're like, oh, these are gonna be really cool. But I remember that the night that we kind of sat down and finalized the community statement was at Bill and Renee's table. I remember it was like the moment where I realized what we called it didn't matter. Like, we had that statement down, and that was who we would be. And it's, we're now on the second name, and maybe at some point there'll be like, but it was the sense that was kind of the grounding, and that what we called it was secondary.
You're showing the picture of the logos.
Yeah.
And I remember you texting me and asking me,
Yeah.
Collective Hearts Chapel,
Yeah.
and laughing and texting you back and asking if you were
No.
serious.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was like, it sounds like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
There were so many. There were so
So I
many
was
bad
really
ones.
glad you dropped that.
God, what was my favorite? Was the Last Supper Club.
Ham Kids.
Ham Kids. Yeah, there was lots of them. I'm not going to
Ham
take all the
Kids.
credit for these. Some of these came from Clark. So just share like a fond memory of when things like clicked, when you felt at home with what Canvas or Collective was doing. Like, kind of what was the season? What was going on?
I don't know if there was like a specific moment. I just, speaking of Chuck and Bill and Renee, I remember I could just say like the most random and crazy things, and you guys never like were like, ugh, foolish child. You know? You were like, yeah, Washington, D.C. is awesome. You want to move there? Yeah, go for it. You were super supportive. And that, at a young age, that gave me courage.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like this huge distance between, because I think I'm as old as your daughters.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And there wasn't, but it didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
It felt like we were all like, yeah, let's do this together.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's interesting to see the way that that's followed through. I know when we first got started and Joe and Paige were coming, there was a conversation I had with Paige. This was before she was singing in the band or anything, and she was just coming and hanging out at Trilogy. And I genuinely was like, why do you guys come? This is, I would think this would be like boring for a high school or whatever. And they were coming really for Robbie and Mike because the music was amazing early on. And I remember Paige saying, I feel like when you ask a question, you listen to me and you treat me like an adult. And I thought, what a low bar that's the experience people have of religion, that the price of admission to get a conversation with someone is to listen. But yeah, I think that the idea of everyone being peers and everyone contributing to that conversation is such a significant one.
Cool. Couldn't have said it better. I was going to say that the thing that was, I don't know, that I have great remembrance of is just really the time after Collective. Like the time we
After
would have.
Canvas
like,
or after Collective?
After.
Yeah.
After the
Yeah, we'd
the
get done
service.
Sunday night.
Yeah, when we'd get done. And just then being part of that community with those people that were there at that time and just enjoying that.
Yeah.
As, everything else was great too.
Yeah.
But just that time that we get to interact with lots of other people.
Absolutely. Robbie, Brooks?
Not the moment I think that clicked for me, but I think worth mentioning. I'd been playing with the band for a little while, and we had our kind of weekly meeting on what we were going to play, and there was a Noah Gunderson song on the list of things, and I'm looking through the lyrics, and I'm like, I don't think we can say that in church. And there's obviously there's kids present, and so I won't divulge the language, but a space that is comfortable, not smoothing off the edges. I think that kind of pulled the veil back a little bit for me. But from a musician's standpoint, or at least for me as a musician, there is an incredible amount of vulnerability that is required to not only to perform in front of people, but to perform with people. And before you perform in front of people, you have to play with the people that you're going to perform with. And it's not as easy as square peg and square hole. It's a marriage when you find the right people to play with, and that just sort of fell together really quickly. And I come from a Catholic background. I don't have a strong connection necessarily to the church side of it. Never have, probably never will. But the ability to feel vulnerable, and that this space, we're not the only ones being vulnerable. We can tell when we're up there, the vulnerability that is shared. That's something that's difficult to find, and isn't just as simple as clicking in different pieces, parts too. So that's probably what did it for me.
Goodness. I don't know.
Do you remember the question?
I mean, probably when we were meeting in a hookah lounge was probably the moment.
Yeah. Yep.
That,
Yeah, Mike connected us
or
with
the fact that we could drink beer while we were in church.
Yeah, and some people took a lot of advantage of that.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with one, I won't mention it by name, but after the service one night, I and this is after we were in here, I had to go to him and be like, dude, you're welcome to have like a couple beers, but you've had 6, and we've been here for 45 minutes. And he was sitting up front, so he kept going back to the fridge, back and forth. But also unconditional belonging. Like, he knew that I was going to say, yo, that's like, this isn't for that. If you're going and looking to get drunk, like, go hang out at a bar, be safe, but that's not what we're here to do. But at the same time, he knew he could show back up. That it wasn't ever a thing where he was shamed or told, probably because everybody else was drinking also, but.
Whiskey's good for the vocal cords.
It is. It's real good for the vocal.
There's just so many things like for me that just I felt like it was where I belonged. I guess the main thing for me was like the fact that the only agenda that we had was for like truth and love, and then like the things that mattered.
Yeah.
Not things that didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like there was no judgment or like trying to change people. It was just acceptance, love. Let's figure things out. Let's learn things.
Yeah.
And it was just so open and safe. And after the thing that I was after in my heart,
Yeah.
that I couldn't find all these years growing up, and I felt out of place whenever I was at church. And that there was something wrong. There was something off.
Yeah.
And that it was that.
And it seems like even though it was a slow burn, I think because of what Robbie was saying, because it requires such vulnerability, I think when we started to realize that we weren't alone, there was such solidarity in going, oh wait, we've felt this way, we've had these questions, we've had all these doubts, and sort of dissatisfaction with what's on offer, but we've had to hide it because we didn't think there was anyone else. And so I think as we started going, oh man, you're feeling the same thing and you're wondering the same thing, and being okay, being able to hang together in that. Go to Annabelle.
I don't know. In my brain, it sounds awesome. I don't know if it's going to come out.
That's
but-
never stopped you before. Just give it to
No,
us.
But I'm just, telling you.
Okay, fair enough.
Earlier, you talked about the work of the people.
Yeah.
And I think that we have these things inside us: music, poetry, philosophy, making sure people can see. And not all places let you do your work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or they discount. There are classes. They're not all
Or like-
considered valuable.
Or like you were saying, like you can do your work, but you can't go past this line.
Yeah.
You can't be raw and vulnerable. You have to like keep it within certain parameters.
Yeah.
And I think that we can do the work here.
Yeah.
And for me, the work has been to go back to Dominican Republic and take my students with me, or to teach
Yeah.
every single day in my classes and not murder
To
my
parent Margot,
students.
which is
Oh, yeah.
full time.
Yeah. and love my family
Yeah.
despite whatever mental illness is happening at the moment.
Yeah.
And we could do all those things here. And you and Canvas Collective,
Yeah.
next name,
Yeah.
is always like, yeah, do it. Like, there wasn't, like, when I asked you guys to help me financially on this trip, I thought I was going to need to give you like an Excel spreadsheet with like, like tax documentation and like an itinerary and like a PowerPoint. But all I needed to do was like send you a text message, and then I got another one back that was like, yeah, do the thing.
Yeah. You should know better than me wanting you to just populate my email with unopened emails full of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Yes,
but,
do it.
But we can do our work, whatever that work may be, with vulnerability and love, and
Yeah.
not be limited.
Yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely. I think I think the best way I've heard it put, actually, I think it was the first sermon that Caitlin gave when she came a couple years ago, was about the difference between fitting in versus belonging. And I think we've all been in so many spaces where we learned to fit in at the expense of being able to do our own work, that what we needed was a place we actually could belong. And I think a lot of people, for the first time, come alive when they figure out what their work actually is. Like, they've spent so long trying to fit in, they've gotten so good at fitting in, they don't even know who they are. They don't know what their work is. They don't know what the song is that needs to, kind of come alive. So, yeah, it's been neat to see that. All right, for the sake of time, we're going to buzz through a few more of these. So in terms of the development phase of Collective, once we sort of made the transition from Canvas to Collective, there were a few things that sort of jumped out at me as significant. The first was our sort of growing community network. And I mentioned kind of artists and makers and business owners. There were these really cool parallel journeys within the first couple years of Collective with Trilogy, with Persimmon Hollow, with New York Ave, which is a branding company, with Cafe Da Vinci being under the ownership of Dan and Melissa. How did you guys see or experience kind of the value of the way that community network not just helped us to do what we were doing, but actually made us who we were, that contributed to the identity that made us Collective?
I don't understand your question.
Okay, good. Robbie, you want to jump in?
That's what makes us.
Yeah.
And right, and I'm not gonna spend a lot of time trying to clarify because I probably can't.
Why don't you, for the sake of argument, clarify so that I can think a half second and
Okay,
formulate
good.
6 words that I've gotten.
So I'll put it this way. I think, I guess in my mind, what I'm saying is that for a long time, spiritual community or church has been seen as like another distinctive silo in a community that has a bunch of other silos. And so around when we were getting started, there was this new silo called Trilogy, there was a new silo called Persimmon Hollow, there was a new silo called New York Ave. And part of what I'm saying is I don't think that it was just that there was energy because there was a bunch of new things happening separately, but there started early on to be relationships and engagement. And I think, again, like the typical way a church would view this would be to go, well, we're the church, we've got the truth, and so what we need to do is find all these other silos and convert them to what we think and how we do things. And I think it went the other way. I think Collective became a product of all these other great, our network.
Okay, exactly. So what I was going to say is that churches, in some regards historically, is a place you go or a walls in a building, but in many ways, those businesses became the community of church that we all enjoyed. And so it wasn't just here, it was when we went to Persimmon Hollow, or
Yeah.
when you went, that was still church. It was still the community, the people that you enjoyed being with here, but it was just an extension of that. And so there wasn't that, well, the veil was ripped away, or whatever
Yeah.
terminology you want to use there that's somewhat biblical, I guess, that there is no temple. It's all open to us to enjoy.
Yeah, very well put. Yeah, kind of blurred the lines between the sacred and the common. We didn't, wasn't a special time or a special place that it was all happening in all those places. Hold on, get a mic.
It was special because of how the dynamic was, like
Yeah.
the fact that it wasn't separate. That's what made it special for sure.
Cool. So let me just give a couple of things, and you guys can, as like a closing, you each get one more chance to share. I'll just point out some things that I think have been important to the Life Collective, and you can speak to whichever one you want. A while back, we took a stance as being clearly open and affirming, and we're, I think, the first in DeLand to do that, and really highlighting that there are many churches that say they're open to everyone, but there's a big difference when you say that you're affirming, that LGBTQ people can come here and no one has any agenda to change them. We're now a significant part of our congregation is LGBTQ community. Peter Rollins, deconstruction, that sort of philosophical shift in what we're doing. The presence of intentional spiritual practice. Peter mentioned silent meditation. I think that pretty quickly got followed with some kind of Richard Rohr stuff on non-dual consciousness, the community statement, and the open table. So any of that stuff that kind of hits for you that you want to share something about, and then we'll wrap up. You want me to say them all again? That was kind of a menu. Brooks, you're holding the microphone. I don't know if you know that. Oh, okay.
It's like you said, it's one thing to say that you're open and affirming to everybody. It's another thing when you then have to go through and practice that. Because it's really easy to say something like we're open and affirming, but then to be able to incorporate it into the fibers of the thread that holds the whole community together. And from an outside perspective, from somebody that hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to be on this most recent leg of the journey, it transpires further than the walls, like you were saying, into the community. And DeLand is such a communal place. And you mentioned, our formation, Trilogy's formation. None of those would have been remotely possible if it wasn't for the communal support. And that communal support sort of flows eventide through this whole community. Probably one of the reasons why it was early on identified as such a vital piece of the Canvas Collective Compass is the location, and why it probably still is valuable to be rooted here.
Yeah, downtown, for sure. Anybody else? You don't have to say anything. Chuck, say you had mentioned when we had lunch just the sort of posture of the spoken or unspoken, that kind of doing the next right thing. You said you wanted to mention that.
Okay, sure. Well, the whole conversation we had about that started with you kind of telling me about the path that this was going, where you were trying to get people understanding how the backstory of collective community was and how it moved forward, and that the thing that always resonated with me back then, or that resonates with me now about it, is that sometimes we didn't know what the heck we were doing, but it was always like, well, we just do the next right thing. And I'm not sure what that was founded in, or where that came from biblically, if there is an origin for it,
I don't know.
or if it was just some sermon we heard somebody give once on tape that we used to listen to. But it was just, that was the next right the next right thing to do. And even Jesus Christ gave that example so much in his life, is that that's what he did every day, is just the next right thing.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Annabelle? Closing words? Unless Brooks wants to go. I mean, I'll say some more things. No pressure, but...
We didn't have the meditation at first.
No, that was Pete and Ange. That was probably a year in, maybe 6 months in.
Did we?
Yeah, I guess maybe.
They were like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were the seeds of it, definitely, all along. But I think that sort of became a fixture probably 4.5 years ago. Why? How does it make you feel?
I think it was something that I came to outside of, because when it was implemented here, it was just, I think,
After you had just left.
after I had just left.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to come back and to experience something that I ended up needing.
Yeah.
Is like something that you guys ended up starting.
Yeah.
And so it's just like everything that, and I'm a huge Pete Rollins fan as well.
I'm aware. I follow you on Facebook so I can keep up with Pete.
Really? So anyway, the sense of belonging continues. Oh, we should say something about the online
Yeah, sure.
thing. Because
The online thing.
the online thing.
Hey there, online.
Hey guys. Because that was me for a while.
Yeah.
And that was really special, like to be a part, even though you couldn't be present.
Yeah.
With. And I remember there was times where, I don't know if you still do this, but you would actually stop during the discussion and see.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we get feedback.
Get feedback.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Like, who else does that?
I don't know.
And Lindsay, and where's Kenny?
Kenny. Yeah, Kenny.
Kenny.
Where's Kenny? Yeah, Kenny.
Shout out
Yeah.
to Kenny.
Yeah.
Yep. Woo.
Our hosts.
Our
Yeah.
hosts online, and yeah, just it was like it's like it's like a little online family.
Yeah.
You know, it was like really special, and
Well-
to know that I could come back here in the physical space and
See those people.
like, yeah, see the people and see everyone else and not feel like I didn't belong anymore or something like that, even
Yeah.
though I hadn't been coming for a while and all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. The the way that started was actually it was when Canvas finally got. It was the first time we ever got our own like building. It was the only time we got our own building. Otherwise, we were like nomads and we were meeting in random places on Sunday night. But the last year, I think we had a building down in Indiana, or I guess like a room in a building. And I remember Allison White moved away, and it was like 3 weeks later. She was in Tacoma, Washington, and was like, I'm here and I'm all alone and there's nothing. There's all these like young hipster churches, but there's not anything like Canvas. Can you put a Skype up on your laptop just right in front of where you're doing the thing? And that was the first ever online community. It was one person Skyped in, just like sitting in the room with everyone. And to your point, contributing. Like we would start the conversation and Allison would jump in. And then over time, more people would come and go, and we had to sort of increase the scope of the platform to include people. But yeah, it was always a very relational thing. We never like built a platform and then went to try and like market it to find people that, you know, wouldn't otherwise be connected. It was always like, this is for people who are wanting to be connected and just can't be there on Sunday night. Or now many people who like live in DeLand and they're like, I'm just not coming out on Sunday night, so I'm going to sit in my PJs. Yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, how about a hand for our panel? Thank you guys so much. Yeah, sure. Why don't you guys can be excused. Can they be excused? Let's ask the community. Yeah. I couldn't hear, sorry. Yes, the online community says that makes so much sense. The online community wants Berryville. That's the thing they're missing. Should visit DeLand. 8 frozen yogurt places. So I want to hopefully, and I was talking with Dave Joseph about this earlier, that my hope is that this will sort of be a catalyst for us to continue to ask questions over the course of the Vision series. So part of what I wanted to do in giving you the sheets is to help you recognize is if there's stuff that you didn't know and maybe you want more clarity, maybe you've got like very specific questions about the history and how we got where we are, ask them. This is a good season for us to kind of rehash where we came from as we're going somewhere new. So also, a good time to find folks who may be here during this season or folks that may be here tonight that aren't here all the time. Find them and introduce yourselves and let them know that you're the folks who have been coming in the recent future. And if you've got questions for them, find them because it is a really special opportunity, I think, to have the kind of relational fabric that we have where everyone is kind of in this together. What Mike said in the video about the Eucharist, I was texting him today and I was like, man, that I'm going to transcript that and use it regularly. I'm going to work that into the rotation of how we move from sermon to Eucharist because it's brilliant. The idea that the infusing of meaning and intention and awareness and community elevates the common to the level of the sacred, that bread and juice become something more when we do this together. And I was thinking about how meal and memory, this experience for us, and tonight is a great example. The table reconstitutes a body that regularly gets dismembered, gets pulled apart, and then it gets remembered, gets put back together. And so in a minute, we're going to be done, right? Someone will get up and say grace and peace, and we'll leave here, and we will dismember or diffuse or disperse or distribute into our diverse lives and our worlds and our families and our groups, and then we come back together. We put it back together. We remember, not merely recollection, not merely mental memory, but remember in the sense that we put this body of people back together. It's the embodiment of the community statement, the embodiment of our unique response to a deeper call, of the spirit of love and grace, whatever it is that's harbored in the name of God, we embody that. And each week we re-embody that. We remember. And tonight as we've remembered our roots, hopefully it helps us to put this body back together in a more comprehensive way, understanding where we've come from a little bit better, and to remember this same deeper call, the love and grace, the same constellation of values in our community statement, even though we know that it's never just the same as it was the week before, or the year before, or now the decade before. It's always at least slightly different, because different people come and go, make up the room and the group. But this is always the body that we have. And there is, I think, part of what I hope you heard from sharing about what this was 10 years ago, or 7 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, is that it seems that there is a deeper spirit at work that is maintained and sort of evolved with this, that's held steady as people have come and gone, as personalities have changed, as music's changed, as theology's changed. There's something here that's held us together. People have come and gone, and some of these amazing people are with us for a season, they're gone another season, they go and return, some go and then come. And I think part of what I've heard over the years that's been so liberating is that we don't judge this. When people come for a while and then they go, we don't have to call that good or bad. It's not binary. It simply is what it is. Remember, we say every week we value journey. We value the path of everyone who's come and gone, stayed and left, gived and received. And we've been made better for the presence of every person that's come in contact with this community for whatever season they've been a part of it. And so we thank God when we remember all of these people, those who've come before us, our roots, being confident that the work that was begun will be carried on. It will be seen through, and that we can share the same prayer, that our love will abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight so that we may be able to discern what is best. That's what we're doing. That's what this season is about, to figure out what is the next right thing. Who are we as a community, and what does that mean for where we go from here? And so these are our roots, not just for Collective, but the best of the Christian tradition, to continue to come to a humble place of asking, what's next? What's the next right thing? The best of those who set out to live in the way of Jesus, they've been asking that question all along, to embody a deeper call, to attempt as imperfect people to embody something as ambitious as the community statement, as ambitious as unconditional belonging, an open table. The fact that we say that we're trying to embody the spirit of love and grace, this is risky. This is vulnerable work. And I'm so glad Robbie brought that up. I mean, it takes courage to keep trying to do what we're doing. And we embody it as people who are broken open, whose blood is shed and tears are shed, as we struggle, as we suffer for the work, as we enjoy it. And I've said this a lot of times in a lot of different ways, because this is what makes the most sense to me, and maybe it'll change over time. But when this group of people, and those of you online, and whoever constitutes the body that is Collective, when we are broken and poured out to embody the spirit of love and grace, when we're broken and poured out for this work, the body of Christ is broken and poured out. This isn't a magic trick. There is not something other somewhere else that is going on. When we are broken and poured out, that is the body of Christ that is broken and poured out. We get to do this every week. To give of ourselves, give to each other, to come and remember, to be put back together again. So the table of all these fond memories, but also the table of being put back together, the table of sharing a meal that puts this community together. This table of unconditional belonging, radical hospitality, the spirit of love and grace embodied vulnerably in our attempt to live these things in our body, in our blood, you and me. This is the table that's set for us tonight. As always, it's open to us and to all people, and no one will ever be turned away. When you're ready, feel free to come and grab a piece of bread and dip it in the cup.